Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. The cruel thing my wife did was erase me while I was still standing right there, then change the locks, force me out of our home, and watch me beg for my own clothes like I was a stranger. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She didn't even look conflicted. She treated my life like a folder she could close, delete, and move on from. Here's how it happened. My name is Kavion Sutter, a black man raised in St. Louis, Missouri, the kind of place where loyalty is supposed to mean something and a handshake still carries weight. I built my adult life on steady habits. Work hard, pay what you owe, show up for the people you love. I believe marriage was built the same way. Small daily commitments that add up to trust. I didn't realize trust can be used like a weapon when the person holding it doesn't believe in it. I met Naila Voss at a community fundraiser in Kansas City when I was in town for a logistics training program. She was sharp, composed, the kind of woman who could make eye contact and make you feel like you mattered. We talked about goals, family, the kind of future we wanted. Naila said she admired stability. She said she wanted a home that felt peaceful. I listened because those are the same things I wanted. When she laughed, it sounded real. When she held my hand, it felt like a promise. We married 3 years later. Not a huge wedding, just enough family and friends to witness something we both swore was permanent. Naila cried during the vows. I thought that meant her heart was anchored. Looking back, I realized tears don't always equal love. Sometimes they're relieved. Sometimes they're theater. Sometimes they're the last honest moment before a person decides they can get whatever they want from you. I didn't know that yet. I just knew I felt chosen. We moved to Aurora, Colorado after I got a better position managing distribution routes for a medical supply company in the Denver area. Naila transferred to a clinic job and told me she was proud of me. We bought a house on a quiet street, 2-story, clean yard, garage big enough for storage and projects. I painted the guest room myself. I installed shelves in the pantry. I believed we were building something that would outlive stress, mood swings, and bad weeks. For a long time, it looked like we were fine. We hosted cookouts. We took weekend drives out toward Golden and Boulder, chasing open air and views that made you feel small in a good way. Naila posted photos of our home like it was a trophy. My mother visited and called our place a blessing. I believed that word. I believed it because I wanted to, because the idea of losing everything I'd built felt impossible, like the ground itself cracking. Then Naila started acting like a stranger. No announcement, no fight, no warning. She just shifted. It began with little things that didn't seem worth confronting. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She started answering texts while I spoke to her, eyes on the screen like my voice was background noise. If I asked what was wrong, she'd blink slowly and say, "Nothing," with a tone that dared me to push further. I told myself it was work stress. People get tired. People get quiet. But the quiet Naila carried wasn't tiredness. It was distance. She started guarding her phone like it was life support. She turned it face down when she entered her room. She took calls outside, even in winter. And she started using this new voice with me. Flat, careful, almost clinical. Like she was practicing how to talk to someone she didn't like but still needed to manage. One night, I tried to plan a simple dinner at home. I grilled chicken, made rice, lit a candle, not because we needed romance, but because I wanted to reconnect. Naila sat down, stared at the plate, and didn't touch it. I asked if she was okay. She sighed dramatically and said, "You don't know how to read a room." That line hit me hard. It wasn't just criticism. It was contempt. It made me feel like my effort was embarrassing. Like my love was something she wanted to punish me for. The next morning, I found the mail stacked in a neat pile on the counter. Opened, sorted, and placed like evidence. Naila had never done that before. She usually left mail for me to handle. I noticed a credit card offer addressed to me. Opened. I asked why she opened it. She said it was probably junk, then tossed in the trash like my question didn't matter. That was the first time I felt a sting of real alarm. It wasn't about the letter. It was about boundaries changing without consent. Her sister, Jasmine Voss, started showing up more. Jasmira was loud, confident, and careless with other people's space. She didn't knock. She walked in like the house belonged to her. Naila encouraged it, smiling in a way that felt like an alliance. Jasmine would sit on our couch, scroll her phone, and comment on things like she was reviewing a product. "This neighborhood is nice," she said once, "for now." She smiled after that, small and knowing. Jasmira began speaking to me like I was a problem they were solving. She'd ask, "So what's your plan?" when I was fixing something around the house, as if I needed permission. She'd say, "Naila deserves more peace than you can give," right in front of me, and Naila wouldn't correct her. My wife would just watch me, measuring my reaction like she was testing how much disrespect I'd tolerate without breaking. I tried to talk to Naila privately. I asked her if something happened, if she was unhappy, if she needed counseling. She leaned against the kitchen counter and said, "I'm not broken. I don't need counseling." Then she added, "Maybe you're the one who needs help. You're always anxious." It was the first time she flipped my concern into a flaw, and something in my stomach tightened because I recognized the tactic even if I didn't have a name for it. The distance became routine. Naila stopped sleeping in our bed and claimed I snored too much, even though she'd never complained before. She slept in the guest room with the door locked. If I knocked, she'd say stop. One night, I heard her laughing softly on the phone, laughing like she used to laugh with me. When I asked who it was, her face went blank, and she said, "Nobody. Go to sleep." Her tone felt like a dismissal of my humanity. I reached out to a friend I trusted, Relin Cade, a black man I'd known since Missouri. Relin had been in my life long enough to know my character. I told him Naila was acting differently, and I felt something was off. He went quiet in a way that made me uncomfortable. Then he said, "Maybe you should just give her what she wants and stop forcing conversations." It didn't sound like him. It sounded like someone feeding me a script. After that, Relin stopped answering my calls. That's when I realized it wasn't just Naila changing. My whole environment felt altered, like people had been briefed without me. Even at work, I noticed myself drifting, reading the same email 3 times, forgetting what I was doing mid-task. My mind kept replaying Naila's blank face. There's a special kind of fear that comes from living with someone who looks at you like you're nothing and expects you to stay calm about it. I started checking our bank account more often. At first, I told myself I was being responsible. Then I saw small transfers that didn't match our usual patterns, little amounts moving out labeled vaguely. Not enough to trigger immediate panic, but enough to feel intentional. When I asked Naila about them, she didn't explain. She shrugged and said, "Bills." When I asked which bills, she said, "Do you want receipts?" "You're exhausted." She made basic accountability sound like abuse. One evening, I came home early and found a man in our living room. Naila's posture stiffened when she saw me, like she hadn't expected me yet. The man stood up slowly. Black, clean haircut, expensive watch. Naila said, "This is Tavian Oaks." Tavian didn't offer his hand. He looked me up and down like he was assessing risk. Naila added, "He's advising me." Advising her on what? She didn't say. She didn't have to. The message was clear. She had a team now, and I wasn't on it. Tavian smiled and said, "Nice place." Not as a compliment, more like a valuation. Naila replied, "It's a good investment." I said, "We live here." Naila's eyes slid toward mine, cold. "Yes," she said. "For now." My chest tightened. I looked at Tavian and asked him to leave. Naila stepped forward and said, "Don't be controlling." She used that word like a weapon, loud enough to make me look dangerous if I pushed it. That night, I sat in my car outside the house for nearly an hour before going inside. I stared at the porch light, wondering when it became a spotlight on my humiliation. I knew, deep down, that something was being planned. Not a separation conversation, not a mutual decision. A plan. The way Naila moved, calculated, detached, felt like she was already on the other side of this marriage and was simply waiting for paperwork to catch up. The next day, on my lunch break, I called a family law office in downtown Denver. My hands shook as I held the phone because reaching out made it real. The attorney I spoke to was named Marlo Denton, black, calm voice, direct. He asked me questions like he'd seen this pattern before. Any sudden secrecy? New people in the house? Financial irregularities? Attempts to isolate you. Each question felt like someone reading my private fear out loud. Marlowe told me something that stung. Assume you're late to the meeting. He said people who plan exits like this usually start months before the partner notices. They collect narratives, witnesses, and leverage. Your job, he said, is to get steady and protect what you legally can protect. Not to panic. Not to retaliate. Protect. That word landed in me like a weight. Protect. Not romance. Not repaired. Protect. I started moving quietly. I documented account activity. I pulled my credit reports. I froze my credit with all bureaus. I changed passwords to my work-related accounts and my business systems. I owned a small side logistics business, a private contract setup that managed scheduling and routing for a few clients. I separated that business money carefully and legally, keeping clean records. I didn't hide assets. I didn't break laws. I simply stopped leaving my future unlocked while Naila walked around with key. Naila noticed my calmness. It irritated her. She started pushing buttons harder as if she needed me to explode. She'd accuse me of acting secretive. The irony made my jaw ache. She'd say things like, "You don't deserve trust," while refusing to answer basic questions. Then she'd sit at the table and scroll her phone, smiling softly at whatever was on it. I stopped asking who she was texting. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized she wanted me to beg. One afternoon, I got an alert from a credit monitoring service, a new inquiry in my name. My stomach dropped. I called the bureau, confirmed an attempt to open a line of credit. The address was ours. The phone number attached wasn't mine. I felt heat spread through my chest. Not anger, something closer to betrayal, so sharp it made me dizzy. I texted Naila, "Did you apply for credit in my name?" She replied, "Stop being dramatic." No denial, no confusion, just contempt. I forwarded the screenshots to Marlowe. He told me not to accuse her beyond what I already had in writing. Let her get sloppy, he said. He advised me to file an identity theft report if it happened again, and to keep records. The idea that my wife could gamble with my credit, my ability to rent, buy, build, made me feel physically sick. I started sleeping in bursts, waking up to check my phone like it was a heart monitor. Naila's hostility turned social. She started telling people I was unstable. Not loudly, quietly, like planting seeds. I found out through a coworker's spouse who lived nearby and asked if everything was okay at home. My face burned with shame. I wanted to defend myself, but I knew the trap. If I reacted emotionally, Naila's narrative would look true. So I swallowed my pride and became careful with every word, every tone, every text. Living like that, monitored by your own spouse, is a slow suffocation. Jasmine escalated. She texted me, "Naila is tired of your games." She left voicemails calling me selfish. One day, she showed up with Tavian again, and they walked through the house like they were inspecting it. Naila stood with them, pointing at walls, talking about market value. I stared at them and felt my hands tremble. "Why are you doing this?" I asked Naila later, privately. Naila leaned close and whispered, "Because I'm not going to be trapped with you forever." That word, trapped, was poison. I had never trapped her. I never raised my hands to her. I never controlled her money. I paid bills, maintained the house, supported her career moves. But Naila spoke as if I was a jailer, because framing me that way gave her moral permission to do whatever she wanted. It's easier to be cruel when you convince yourself the other person deserves it. 3 weeks after I secured my assets, Naila asked me to talk. She sat in the living room, posture straight, face composed like a manager delivering a performance review. "This isn't working," she said. "You're draining." I asked what she meant. She waved it off. "You know what you do," she said, an accusation with no details, designed to keep me arguing with shadows. Then she said, "You should move out. Give me space." I told her I wasn't leaving my home without a formal agreement. Naila's eyes narrowed. "So you're going to fight," she said. I answered, "I'm going to be protected." She leaned forward, voice low and calm. "You don't get to decide how this goes." The chill in her tone made my skin prickle. It wasn't anger. It was a certainty, like she knew she already had the upper hand and was simply informing me of my role. That night, I slept on the couch. Around 2 a.m., I heard the front door open and close. I sat up, heart pounding. Naila came in quietly and went upstairs. I heard drawers opening, paper rustling, the soft clink of something metallic. I didn't confront her. I documented the time. In the morning, she acted normal, too normal, making coffee, humming. People who are guilty sometimes act nervous. Naila acted entitled, like the house was already hers, and I was the temporary obstacle. A few days later, Naila invited people over without telling me. Jasmira, Tavian, and 2 women I didn't recognize. They sat at my dining table laughing while I stood in the doorway, exhausted from work. Naila didn't introduce me. She didn't offer me a plate. She looked up and said, "Oh, you're home." Jasmira smiled wide and said, "We were just talking about how peace feels when the wrong man finally leaves." I went upstairs, shut myself in the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. My eyes looked hollow, like someone had been draining me slowly. I realized something painful. Naila wasn't waiting for me to leave. She was building pressure until I broke, because a broken man signs anything just to stop the pain. I thought of Marlowe's warning, late to the meeting, and felt my throat tighten. I wasn't late anymore. I was in it, and I had to stay steady. The next week, I got another credit alert, another inquiry attempt. This time, the lender called to verify information. The questions made it clear someone had used my details. I ended the call and felt rage rise, but I forced myself to breathe. I filed a formal report, froze everything again, and forwarded all documentation to Marlowe. Naila walked past me that evening and said, "You're really spiraling." She smirked. She enjoyed watching me fight for basic security. Then the day came. I left for work early, like always, because routine was the only thing I could control. Around noon, I saw missed calls from an unknown number. Then a text from Jasmira, "Come get your things later. Don't act crazy." My blood turned cold. I called Naila. No answer. I left work and drove home with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would crack my ribs. My key didn't work. I tried again. The lock was new. I knocked, then pounded. Finally, Jasmira opened the door a few inches with the chain on, smiling like she'd been waiting. "Oh," she said, "you came fast." I demanded to speak to Naila. Jasmira tilted her head. "Naila is resting. She needs peace." I saw Naila behind her in the hallway, arms crossed, face calm, eyes empty. "Naila, what is this?" I asked, voice shaking. Naila didn't blink. "You don't live here anymore," she said. No emotion, no hesitation, like she was reading a line from a script. I asked to get my clothes, my laptop, my medication, basic things. Jasmira said, "We'll bag it up later." Naila watched me with the same calm gaze you'd give a stranger arguing about a policy. I called the police non-emergency line because I didn't know what else to do. An officer arrived and explained, politely, that without a court order, this could be treated as a civil dispute. Hearing those words felt like being swallowed by the system. Naila stood behind the chain and said, "He can stay somewhere else." The officer asked if I had a place to go. Naila replied, "He'll figure it out." That was the moment I knew her cruelty had no bottom. I slept in my car that night in a parking lot in Lakewood, staring at the ceiling, feeling like my life had been tossed into the street. Shame sat on my chest like a person. I wanted to call my mother, but I couldn't stand the sound of her worry. I sat there with tears gathering, refusing to fall because even my crying felt like something Naila would enjoy if she could see it. The next morning, I went straight to Marlowe's office in downtown Denver. He didn't look surprised. He looked angry, controlled. "Okay," he said. "Now we move." He filed an emergency motion for access to the home and documented the lockout. He told me not to contact Naila directly unless necessary. "Let them talk through paper," he said. "People who act like this panic when paper shows up." I stayed with a coworker in Arvada in a spare room that smelled like detergent and someone else's routine. I felt reduced, from husband to displaced body. At work, I performed like a robot because emotion would have made me collapse. Every night, I lay on that bed and replayed the chain on my own front door. I heard Naila's voice saying, "You don't live here anymore." That sentence became a bruise I kept pressing. Naila sent agreements through Jasmira, documents that weren't agreements but traps. They demanded I relinquish claim to certain accounts, accept responsibility for debts I didn't authorize, and voluntarily move out for an unspecified period. Marlowe read them and shook his head. "This is a surrender document," he said. "They want you exhausted enough to sign." I felt my throat burn. 10 years of marriage, and now I was being managed like an enemy. The first court appearance was in Centennial, and Naila arrived looking polished, calm, almost bored. Jasmine sat behind her like a guard. Tavian sat farther back, hands folded, watching. Naila didn't look at me. She spoke to her attorney like I was an object. When she finally spoke to the judge, she painted me as volatile and paranoid, implying she locked me out for her safety. Her voice was controlled. No tears, no trembling. She didn't need sympathy. She needed authority. Marlowe didn't yell. He didn't insult her. He presented the lock change timeline, my consistent work history, and the credit inquiry records. He showed that I had taken protective steps after strange financial movements began, steps that were legal and documented. He presented screenshots and dates. The judge's face tightened as the details lined up. Naila's attorney tried to minimize it. Naila sat there with the same blank expression, like accountability was a boring inconvenience. The judge issued temporary orders. I could retrieve essential personal property with a neutral third party present. Financial restraints were placed on certain activities pending review. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a boundary. And boundaries matter when you've been treated like you're not allowed to exist. When I walked out of that courtroom, my legs felt weak, not because I'd won, but because I'd survived the first round without breaking. Returning to the house to retrieve my things felt like walking into a museum of my own life after someone removed all the exhibits. Family photos were gone. The space where our wedding picture had been was empty. The living room smelled different. New candles, freshener, like someone tried to erase my presence chemically. Naila stood in the hallway watching, arms crossed, face calm. Jasmine smirked the entire time. They didn't speak to me like a person. They spoke like I was a problem being moved. I packed clothes, work gear, and personal items while an officer stood nearby. I kept my hands steady, even though my chest felt like it was caving in. In the bedroom, my side of the closet was half empty, as if Naila had already decided what parts of me were allowed to remain. I found a drawer missing. When I asked where it went, Naila shrugged. No remorse. No answer. Just a shrug that said, I can do whatever I want. Back in my car, I cried quietly. Not loud. Not dramatic, just silent tears sliding down my face while I stared at the steering wheel. I wasn't crying because I missed Naila. I was crying because I had finally accepted she didn't love me the way I loved her. I had been loyal to someone who saw loyalty as a resource to extract. That realization burns in a way that doesn't heal quickly. The deeper financial review began. Bank compliance asked for more documentation. My identity theft report triggered follow-up calls. This wasn't a dramatic movie scene. This was slow, procedural accountability. Forms, statements, dates. But that's exactly why it mattered. Paper doesn't care about charm. Paper doesn't care about smirks. Paper shows patterns. And Naila had left a trail because she believed I was too emotional and too slow to protect myself. Marlowe obtained records showing unusual transfers from our joint account to an unfamiliar account connected to a consulting invoice. The name on the invoice, Tavian Oaks. The amounts weren't huge at first, but they were consistent. It looked like siphoning, small enough to hide, steady enough to add up. Naila's defense was simple. I don't know. No remorse. No concern. No attempt to explain. She acted as if my confusion was the problem, not her behavior. Naila continued pushing for total control during negotiations. She didn't want fairness. She wanted domination, home possession, financial authority, and an agreement that framed me as the aggressor. She refused reasonable compromises. Marlowe warned me, people like this don't settle until the system corners them. He was right. Every time we offered a clean exit, Naila escalated demands, as if she needed to win more than she needed to be free. Then karma began to move, quietly, realistically. A lender denied Naila's attempt to refinance because flagged irregularities required verification. A credit account froze, pending investigation. A bank placed temporary holds on unusual transactions. Naila's team started disappearing. Tavian stopped showing up. Jasmira's text slowed. People who help you do wrong love the thrill, but they don't love consequences. And consequences were finally arriving in the form they couldn't talk their way out of: documentation. At the next hearing, the judge's patience was thinner. He asked Naila direct questions about the credit inquiries and the transfers. Naila responded with irritation, not remorse. She tried to act offended that anyone would question her. That attitude backfired. Judges are human, and humans notice arrogance. Marlowe presented more records, including timestamps that aligned with Naila's lockout timeline. The story Naila sold, fear, safety, instability, didn't match the evidence of strategic financial movement. The judge tightened temporary financial orders and warned of further legal consequences if misconduct continued. Naila's attorney looked tense. Naila looked angry for the first time, but not because she hurt me, because she was losing control. That's the difference between guilt and frustration. Guilt says, "I'm sorry." Frustration says, "How dare you stop me?" Naila had only frustration. She still didn't glance at me like I mattered. Private humiliation became private discipline. While the case crawled forward, I rebuilt quietly. I kept working. I expanded my side business carefully. New contracts, clean accounting, no drama. I moved into a small apartment in Lakewood, furnished it simply, and built routines that didn't require anyone's permission. I ran early mornings not to show off, but to burn off the stress that lived in my muscles. I ate when I didn't feel like eating. I slept when my mind tried to keep me awake with old images of that chain on my door. Months later, the divorce moved toward final resolution with findings that made Naila's demands collapse. The court treated the credit attempts and financial irregularities seriously. Naila couldn't dump unauthorized debts on me the way she planned. The more the papers stacked up, the smaller her leverage became. That's the kind of karma that feels sudden from the outside, but is actually built by every choice a person makes when they think they're untouchable. Naila didn't apologize even at the end. She didn't soften. She didn't offer closure. She walked through the process like she was still the victim of my refusal to surrender. Jasmira vanished completely, like a person who never existed. Tavian's name became something that appeared in documents, not in rooms. The team that helped Naila force me out wasn't there to hold her hand when consequences required signatures and accountability. The last time I saw Naila in person was outside the courthouse in Centennial. She looked through me like I was air. Her face held that same cold certainty, but it was thinner now, strained by the fact she didn't get the clean victory she expected. I didn't stop to argue. I didn't beg. I didn't ask why. I nodded once and walked away because I finally understood I would never get honesty from someone who used dishonesty as a lifestyle. My comeback wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It wasn't a speech. It was the quiet rebuilding of a life she couldn't reach anymore. A clean credit file, a protected business, a home I chose for myself, peaceful, private mine. Naila forced me out of our house to break me. But in doing that, she accidentally gave me something I didn't even know I needed. A reason to stop offering my loyalty to someone who never deserved it, and the space to become successful in a way she would never get to touch again. If you felt that chain on the door like it was in your own life, don't leave yet. Click the next story on screen because it's even colder. She tried to ruin his name, and the receipts ended everything. Subscribe for more true-to-life betrayal stories with silent revenge. And drop paperwork in the comments if you love karma that can't be argued with. The end.